The man lived in a quiet neighborhood at the edge of town, a place he had chosen for its peace and distance from drama. His house stood on a wide plot with a clear line of trees that separated him from the rest of the subdivision. He liked it that way: quiet mornings on his porch, evenings by himself, the sound of crickets at night. He had no interest in neighborhood politics or petty rules, which was why he was surprised when a letter came tucked under his front door one morning. The envelope carried the bold stamp of the HOA, the handwriting sharp and cold. He opened it slowly, reading the words that demanded he join the association immediately and begin paying fees. The letter listed rules, fines, threats, all written with the arrogance of power. But the man knew the truth. His land was not part of their boundary. His property had always been separate. It was the reason he bought it in the first place. He pulled out his deed. The map lines clear, the survey precise. His land stood outside their control, outside their rules. He shook his head, muttering, "They have no claim here." He wrote a reply letter, calm but firm, attaching a copy of his deed, mailing it back with a short note. "This property is outside HOA boundaries. Your demands are invalid." He thought that would be the end of it. A misunderstanding cleared. But he underestimated the pride of the HOA. Days later another letter arrived, this one harsher, sharper, threatening legal action, demanding compliance. His jaw tightened as he read it, tossing it onto the table with frustration. He ignored it, certain they couldn't touch him. But the real threat didn't come on paper. It came at night. It began with cars, strange vehicles he didn't recognize, parking on the street outside his house, engines idling, headlights flashing once before turning off. The man sat by his window, watching the shadows inside the cars, figures that didn't move, only watched. The first night he thought it was a mistake. The second night he knew it wasn't. Every evening as the sky darkened, the cars returned, always different models, always the same purpose: intimidation. Neighbors began to notice too, whispering among themselves, glancing nervously toward his home. He stood on his porch once and shouted at the car parked across the street, his voice sharp, "What do you want?" The window rolled down only halfway, a figure inside staring but saying nothing before driving away slowly. The man's chest tightened with anger. He had lived a quiet life, and now these games invaded his peace. But the worst came on the fourth night. When the knock on his door shattered the silence, it was late. The street empty except for the two dark cars parked nearby. The knock was heavy, deliberate. He approached cautiously, his hand hovering over the lock, his voice low. "Who is it?" A deep voice answered, firm, "Police." Open the door. His eyes narrowed, suspicion flaring. He looked through the peephole and saw two men in uniforms, their shirts dark blue, badges flashing in the porch light, belts heavy with gear, their faces serious. But something felt wrong. Their car behind them had no official plates, no markings, just a plain black sedan. His heart pounded as he unlocked the door slowly but left the chain in place, opening it only a crack. One man stepped closer, holding up his badge quickly, almost too quickly. "You're in violation of HOA rules," the man said sternly, "and if you don't comply, you'll face arrest." The man's eyes narrowed, his voice steady. "HOA rules don't apply to me. I've shown proof. This land is outside your boundary." The second man leaned in, his tone harsher. "That's not how this works, sir. Either you join and pay your dues, or we take you in tonight." His stomach tightened, his mind racing. The uniforms were wrong, the badges cheap, their words rehearsed but sloppy. He realized then what this was. They weren't real cops. They were actors, pawns of the HOA sent to scare him. His hand tightened on the doorframe, his voice sharp now. "You're not police, and you have no authority here. Leave my property before I call the real law." The men exchanged a glance, their eyes flickering with uncertainty. One leaned forward again, trying to sound firm. "You're making a mistake." But his words lacked the weight of truth. The man slammed the door shut, locking it tight, his chest heaving. He moved quickly to the window, peeking out as the fake officers returned to their car, speaking in hushed tones before driving off into the night. The man stood in the dark, his fists clenched, his anger deep, his voice low as he whispered to himself. So this is how they want to play. The hook tightened then, not just with fear but with determination. Because if the HOA thought fake cops could intimidate him, they had no idea the fight they had just started. The next evening, the man sat by his living room window, the lights in his house dimmed, his eyes fixed on the empty street, his chest heavy with tension. He knew they would return, the fake cops, the cars, the intimidation, and he was ready to see them for what they truly were. Shadows hired by the HOA. He had lived long enough to recognize authority and to know when it was only a costume. The night deepened, the moon casting pale light over the roofs, the streetlights flickering, and once again, the same dark sedan rolled slowly to a stop in front of his house. The engine growling low, the man leaned forward, his jaw tight. Two figures stepped out. The same men from the night before, their uniforms neat but wrong, their belts heavy but mismatched, their movements stiff, like actors playing a role they hadn't practiced enough. They walked up the path with confidence painted over their nervous steps. And then the knock came again, heavy, deliberate, echoing through the house like a warning. The man stood, calm but alert. He walked to the door slowly, his hand steady as he checked the chain. His voice level, "Who is it?" The reply came, the same deep voice as before, "Police, open up. This is your final warning." His lips tightened, his anger simmering. He pulled the door open just enough to see their faces clearly. One of the men raised a badge again, flashing it too quickly, the metal glinting under the porch light. But the man caught it this time. The badge didn't have the seal of the county, the lettering was wrong, the number fake. His eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. "That's not a real badge, you don't work for the law." The man with the badge stiffened, his jaw tightening. His partner stepped forward quickly, trying to cover. "Don't make this harder on yourself. You're in violation of HOA rules. That makes you subject to arrest." The homeowner laughed bitterly, the sound sharp. "Arrest? For not joining your little club? You have no authority here, and you know it." The first man's eyes darted nervously to the second. But then he leaned in, his tone lowering, trying to sound threatening. "The HOA doesn't like people who say no. You better reconsider, or things will get ugly." The words were wrong, too personal, too sloppy. No real officer would speak that way. The homeowner stood taller, his voice rising. "You're trespassing on my property, and if you don't leave right now, I'll call the sheriff, the real sheriff, and we'll see how fast your fake badges land you in jail." The silence that followed was heavy. The two men exchanged another glance, their bluff crumbling. But their pride forced them to push one more time. "Last chance." The second man growled, "Join the HOA, pay the dues, or next time it won't just be us at your door." The homeowner stepped back, his eyes blazing, his voice steady and sharp as steel. "Next time you show up here, you'll be the ones in handcuffs." With that, he slammed the door shut, locking it tight, his heart pounding but his mind clear. He moved quickly to the window again, peeking out as the two men walked back to their car. Their shoulders tense, their steps faster than before, their act broken. They climbed into the sedan and drove off into the night. The man exhaled slowly, his fists unclenching. He knew this was only the beginning. The HOA had crossed a line now. They weren't just sending letters or parking cars. They were sending fake police to intimidate him. But intimidation only worked if you were afraid, and fear wasn't something he carried anymore. He turned off the light, stood in the darkness of his living room, and whispered to himself, "They think I'll break, but they have no idea what's coming." Outside, the street was empty again, but the memory of their voices and their fake badges lingered like a shadow. The hook tightened further, because now the battle wasn't just about rules and property, it was about exposing lies, and the man was ready to fight. The next morning the man stepped outside to collect his mail. The sun was bright but the street felt heavy, like a cloud of unease hung over it. He noticed curtains shifting in nearby windows, neighbors peeking at him then pulling back quickly, whispers carried across the yards. Faint but sharp, he could feel their eyes on him. The letterbox was empty, no new threats, no new demands, but the silence itself carried weight. He walked slowly back to his porch and sat down, staring across the street where the dark sedan had parked the night before, the tire marks still fresh on the pavement. His jaw tightened. He knew the neighbors had seen. They always did. In a neighborhood this quiet nothing stayed hidden. Soon after, an older man from 2 houses down approached carefully, his steps slow, his eyes darting left and right as though he didn't want anyone to see him. He stopped at the edge of the porch, his voice low. "I saw them last night. Those so-called officers, they don't look right. Not real cops." The homeowner nodded silently. The old man continued, "You need to be careful, the HOA. They've done this before, not with fake police but with threats, fines, letters. They scare people into obeying." His voice trembled slightly, his eyes dropping. "Most folks just give in. Easier that way." Before the homeowner could reply, the old man walked off quickly, his shoulders hunched, fear pressing him down. Later that afternoon, as the man worked on trimming the hedges, a young mother walked by pushing a stroller. She slowed for a moment, her eyes filled with sympathy. "We know what they're doing to you," she whispered. "But please, don't make it worse, they'll come after all of us." Her words carried both fear and warning. She hurried away before he could answer. The man watched her go. His chest heavy, he realized the HOA's intimidation wasn't just aimed at him. It was aimed at the entire community, using him as an example to spread fear. That night the whispers grew louder. Small groups gathered at the corner of the street, some voices sharp. He should just pay, just join, stop bringing trouble, others more supportive but hushed. He's right, they're wrong. But no one else dares to stand up. The division grew clearer. The board thrived on this divide, spreading rumors. That the man was in legal trouble, that the police were watching him, that he was dangerous to side with. Children repeated the whispers. Neighbors pulled away. The once friendly nods now replaced with cautious stares. And yet, in that fear the man noticed something else. A spark. A few neighbors still dared to greet him. Still dared to slip quiet notes of encouragement into his mailbox. Unsigned but filled with words like, "Don't give up and we're with you." It was a small comfort, but it told him he wasn't completely alone. The HOA wanted him isolated, painted as a criminal, crushed under fake authority. But fear worked only as long as the lie held. He stood on his porch that night staring at the lake in the distance. The faint glow of the HOA office windows on the far side. His fists clenched, his voice low. "If they think fear will break me, they've chosen the wrong man." Behind him, the neighborhood remained quiet, but he could almost feel the tension in every home, every locked door, every hushed voice. The HOA had built their power on fear, but he was determined to be the crack that would break it wide open. The man had learned enough to know that fear alone was the HOA's greatest weapon. But fear could be broken with truth, and truth lived in records, in evidence, in things that couldn't be twisted by lies or fake uniforms. So one evening he sat at his kitchen table, his laptop open, stacks of old papers scattered across the wood, the lamp glowing dimly above him, his hand steady as he spread out his property deed once more, tracing the boundary lines with his finger. He whispered to himself, "They can't take what isn't theirs." But he needed more than just his word and his deed. He needed undeniable proof, something so strong that even their arrogance would crumble. The first step was cameras. He went to the hardware store the next morning, his face calm, his voice steady as he asked for motion-activated security cameras. The clerk looked at him, oddly but said nothing. That night he installed them along the porch, near the driveway, facing the street. Quiet machines with blinking red eyes ready to capture the truth. When the cars returned, their engines rumbling in the dark, he stayed inside, silent, watching from the small monitor in his hand as the lenses recorded every second. The silhouettes of men inside the sedan, the nervous shifting, the way they pointed toward his house. One even stepping out briefly to look around before climbing back in. The footage was clear, no plates on the car, no police markings, nothing official. He saved every file carefully, storing copies in multiple drives. The next step was the letters. He gathered each one the HOA had sent, lining them up in order, reading through the arrogant words again and again. Threats of fines, warnings of legal action, demands for dues, all written as though their power stretched to every corner of the neighborhood. But when he compared them with the official county maps he had printed, the truth was obvious. His property line stood outside their shaded zone, untouched, free from their rules. He circled it boldly in red ink, proof on paper. But still he wanted more, something that would not only protect him but expose them. So he drove to the county records office, the same place where every parcel, every deed, every survey was stored. The clerk looked at him with faint curiosity when he asked for files connected to the HOA office itself. "You're interested in their building?" She asked cautiously. The man nodded, his voice firm. "Yes, I want to know exactly what land they sit on." The clerk disappeared into the back, leaving him to sit in silence, his fingers tapping against the wooden desk. The wait felt long but his patience was strong. Finally she returned with a stack of folders, some old, the edges yellowed, the ink fading. He opened them carefully, scanning page after page. At first it seemed normal, transactions, signatures, transfers of land. But then, something strange caught his eye, a survey number that didn't match the surrounding parcels. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. The office building's land had been filed differently, sloppily, and the ownership records didn't lead to the HOA directly. They ended decades back under a name he didn't recognize. His pulse quickened, his breath shallow. They don't own it. He muttered to himself, the thought echoing like thunder. He copied the documents, stuffing them carefully into his folder. His mind racing as he left the office, driving home with determination burning hotter than ever. That night he spread the new files across his table, matching them against the maps, the lines clear, the proof undeniable. The HOA had built their office, their proud symbol of power, on land they didn't fully control. Maybe even land that was never legally theirs at all. He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion heavy in his bones but satisfaction stronger. The fake cops, the threats, the intimidation, it all suddenly looked weaker in the light of this discovery. Because if the truth came out, if he played this right, their entire empire could crumble on the soil they stood on. He whispered to himself in the stillness of the night, his voice calm but sharp, now I have what I need. The cameras clicked quietly outside, recording the empty street. But inside the man's house, the fire of resolve glowed brighter than ever. For now he wasn't just defending himself, he was preparing to expose them. The man sat at his kitchen table late into the night, papers spread across every inch of the wood, his lamp casting a yellow glow over the maps, deeds, and survey records he had copied from the county office. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. His eyes traced line after line, every number, every boundary, every signature. He was searching for something. Anything that could explain why the HOA acted with such arrogance. Why they felt untouchable. His finger stopped at the survey number again, the one that didn't match the rest, the parcel marked under different code. He pulled the old file closer, the pages stiff with age, the ink fading, the name of the last listed owner barely legible. It was dated decades back, long before the HOA even existed. He leaned closer, his pulse quickening. This parcel wasn't transferred properly, no recorded sale, no legal chain linking it to the HOA. His eyes widened as realization hit him. The office building they used as their headquarters, the place where they held their meetings, sent their threats, and paraded their fake power, stood on land they did not legally own. His chest tightened, his breath heavy. The words slipped from his lips in a whisper. It's not theirs. He pushed his chair back, standing, pacing the room, his hands trembling slightly from the rush of discovery. Everything suddenly made sense, their intimidation, their desperation. Even the fake police, it was all built on sand. They had created an empire on land that didn't belong to them, and if he held the right documents, he could prove it. He sat back down, forcing himself to stay calm, forcing himself to check every detail. He laid the office parcel map over the county boundary map, the overlap perfect, the building's foundation sitting squarely on the disputed land. He dug through tax records next, his eyes scanning quickly, his heart pounding faster when he found years of unpaid property taxes listed under the old owner's name, never transferred, never corrected. The land was technically abandoned in legal terms, still in the county's books as available. He leaned back slowly, the fire of triumph in his eyes. They weren't just liars, they were squatters. Their power center was nothing more than a house of cards waiting to collapse. His lips curled into a grim smile. They built their kingdom on land they don't even own, he whispered, the sound of the words filling the quiet house like thunder. He pulled out a notebook, writing quickly, making copies of every detail. He knew he had to move carefully, to be silent, to let the HOA think they still held power while he tightened the rope around them. He looked once more at the photo of their proud office building, its glass doors, its polished sign, its rows of cars parked outside, all of it sitting on soil that didn't legally belong to them. The irony cut deep. He imagined the president boasting in front of the board, smirking at him, laughing at his protests, while under their very feet, the ground was already slipping away. He closed the folder carefully, his heart calmer now, his mind sharper. He had proof, undeniable, solid proof that the HOA's foundation was rotten. And when the time came to reveal it, the shock would ripple through the neighborhood like a storm. The fake cops, the late-night threats, the whispers, they would all crumble under the weight of this truth. He whispered to himself one last time before turning off the lamp, his voice steady. They think I'm cornered, but I've already found their weakest point. Outside, the street was dark and still, but inside the man's house, the storm was already building, ready to strike. The man barely slept after the discovery, his mind running in circles, pieces of a puzzle sliding into place one by one. The faint sound of night insects outside his window faded into the background as he sat at the table. The documents laid out like a map of war. He had the proof, but proof alone wasn't enough. He needed to understand how everything tied together. Why the HOA had been so desperate to break him. Why they sent fake cops. Why they doubled down when he refused to pay. He leaned forward, his pen scratching notes across a page, each detail carefully written, each connection underlined. At first it looked like random threads, letters of demand, cars parked outside, fake officers at his door, neighbors whispering. But then he noticed the pattern. Every time he pushed back, they escalated. Every refusal met with intimidation. Every stand he took answered with new tricks. It wasn't just about money. It was about power. The HOA wanted everyone to believe they controlled everything. Even land they didn't own. They wanted fear to be stronger than fact. He circled the office parcel number again, staring at it, the realization sharp. Their office is built on nothing, he muttered, his voice low but firm. They've been ruling from a place that doesn't even belong to them. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. The HOA president wasn't just enforcing rules, he was protecting a lie. The entire board was standing on stolen ground, and they couldn't afford for anyone to know. That was why they targeted him so hard. That was why they tried to paint him as a troublemaker. They wanted the neighborhood's eyes fixed on him while their secret stayed hidden. His chest tightened, his hands gripping the edge of the table. They tried to make me the villain, but I'll be the mirror that shows their truth. He whispered. He opened his laptop and pulled up county tax records again, tracing the chain of ownership, page after page confirming what he already knew. The office land was never legally transferred, the taxes unpaid, the deeds still floating in limbo. He shook his head in disbelief. It was so simple, so sloppy. Yet they had gotten away with it for years because no one had ever looked closely, no one had dared, until now. He printed the records, stacking them neatly, the sound of the printer loud in the quiet room. Then he cross-checked the dates of the HOA's formation against the land records. And the gap was glaring. The HOA claimed authority in the neighborhood long before they had even tried to claim the office land. Their arrogance had always been bigger than their foundation. The man leaned back, exhaustion pulling at his shoulders, but a grim smile creeping across his face. He had connected the dots, the intimidation, the fake cops, the office, all of it. The HOA's power was built on a rotten foundation, one that could collapse the moment the truth was revealed. He stood and walked to the window, pulling the curtain back. Slightly, the street was empty tonight, no dark sedans, no fake officers, but he knew they'd be back. They weren't done yet, the battle wasn't over. But now he held something they could never take away. He whispered to the glass, his reflection staring back at him. They think they can scare me, but I have what they fear most, proof. The papers rustled softly behind him on the table, the ink still fresh on his notes. Every line a piece of the story that would soon unravel their empire. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the calm settle in. Tomorrow he would take the next step. Tomorrow he would start tightening the net. But tonight he allowed himself one thought, sharp and satisfying. The HOA built their throne on my land, and soon the whole neighborhood will know. The man woke the next morning with a heavy but steady heart, the plan forming sharper in his mind than it had the night before. He no longer felt like the hunted, no longer felt like the target of their intimidation. Now he was the one holding the strings, and it was time to pull them slowly, carefully, until the HOA wrapped themselves in their own lies. He dressed plainly, his boots crunching on the gravel as he walked outside. The neighborhood seemed quiet, but the air carried a tension he could almost taste. The people had seen too much, too many threats, too many whispers. They were waiting for something to break. That afternoon he didn't wait long. The dark sedan returned, the engine low, two men stepping out in the same sloppy uniforms, their badges still shining cheap in the sunlight. They walked up to his porch with forced confidence. One smirked as he spoke. "We warned you already, you've had your chance. The HOA doesn't tolerate rule breakers." The man leaned against the railing, calm, his arms crossed, his eyes sharp. He let them speak, let their arrogance spill out. Then he straightened slowly, his voice calm but cutting. "You know what's funny about threats?" The fake cops froze for a moment. Confused, the man stepped closer, lowering his voice but making every word sharp. "Threats only work if the other person doesn't know the truth. But I do. I know you're not real police. I know your badges are fake. And I know exactly what ground your masters are. Standing on, the two men stiffened, their smirks faltering. The taller one tried to recover, his tone rough. Careful with your words, sir, you don't want to make this worse. But the man only smiled faintly, his calm more dangerous than anger. Worse? For me? No, worse for the HOA, because the land under their precious office doesn't even belong to them, and I have the proof right here. He tapped the folder tucked under his arm, the gesture sharp, deliberate. The two fake officers exchanged a quick nervous glance, their act cracking. The shorter one stammered, "You don't know what you're talking about." But his voice lacked conviction. The man leaned in, his eyes blazing. "Don't I? I've been to the county office, I've seen the records, I know the taxes on that parcel haven't been paid in decades. I know the deed doesn't list the HOA, and I know the entire building where they plot their game sits on land they don't own." The silence that followed was heavy, the fake cops shifting uncomfortably, their hands twitching, their eyes darting to the car as if ready to retreat. The man didn't stop, his voice rising. "So go back to your board, tell your president, tell every smug face that sits at that long table, I've caught them, and the next time they send you to my door, it won't be me who looks like the criminal, it will be them." The neighbors nearby had stepped onto their porches quietly, listening, their faces curious, hopeful, the words carrying through the evening air. One of the fake cops finally muttered, "You'll regret this," before turning quickly, walking fast back to the sedan. The other followed, their confidence broken, their shoulders tense. They climbed inside and drove away without another word. The man watched them go, his chest steady, his hands firm. He knew they would run back to the board. He wanted them to. He wanted his words to echo in their meeting room, to spread panic through their false kingdom. Behind him, a neighbor clapped softly, another muttered. About time someone stood up to them. The man turned, his face calm but his eyes sharp. He gave no speech, no boast, only nodded before stepping back inside. His plan had worked. He had planted the seed of fear, and now he would wait for the HOA to stumble into the trap he had set with the truth. And when they did, the fall would be greater than they ever imagined. The HOA meeting was always a show of power, the board sitting at the long polished table, the president in the middle like a judge, neighbors seated in folding chairs lined against the walls, their faces tight with fear or frustration. Every month the same routine, the same rules read aloud, the same threats of fines, the same arrogance filling the air. But this night was different. The room was heavier, whispers louder. People already buzzing about the fake police who had been seen around, about the cars parked in the dark, about the man who refused to bend. The man walked in slowly, a plain folder tucked under his arm, his shoulders square, his steps firm. Every eye turned toward him, some wide with curiosity, some with quiet hope, and a few with fear. The president smirked as soon as he saw him, leaning back in his chair, tapping his pen against the table. Well, our troublemaker finally decided to show his face. His voice carried through the hall, half mockery, half warning. A few board members chuckled, others sat straighter, ready to watch the man be humiliated. But he didn't flinch. He didn't even slow his steps. He walked right to the center of the room, stopping in front of the table, his voice calm but clear. "I didn't come here for your threats. I came here to tell the truth." The president leaned forward, his smirk wider. "Truth? You mean the fact that you're violating our rules, that you refuse to pay your dues, that you think you're above everyone else in this community?" The man placed the folder on the table with a heavy thump, his eyes never leaving the president. "No, I mean the truth that will end your game once and for all." The room stilled, neighbors shifting in their chairs, the tension sharp. The man opened the folder slowly, pulling out copies of deeds, maps, and tax records, spreading them one by one across the table, each page louder than words. The president frowned, his smirk faltering slightly. "What is this supposed to be?" The man's voice rose, steady and sharp. "This is proof that the office you sit in, the very building you call your headquarters, the place you threaten this community from, doesn't even belong to you. It sits on land you never legally owned, land you've squatted on for decades, land that by law is not yours." Gasps filled the room, neighbors leaning forward, bored members stiffening. The president's face paled, his pen slipping from his fingers. That's not possible," he stammered. But the man pushed the tax record closer. The unpaid years circled in bold red ink. "Possible? It's undeniable. You never paid taxes on it. You never held the deed. You've built your entire power on stolen ground, and now I own the claim to it." His words echoed through the hall like a hammer striking stone. The neighbors erupted in whispers, shock rippling through the crowd, some clapping softly, others laughing bitterly. The board members exchanged panicked glances. The president slammed his hand on the table, trying to recover, his voice trembling but loud. "This is a lie, a trick. He's trying to mislead you." But his voice carried no weight anymore. The neighbors had seen the papers, the truth shining clearer than any threat. The man leaned closer, his voice low but cutting. "You sent fake police to my door. You parked cars outside my home. You tried to scare me into silence. But now it's your turn to be afraid. Because your empire has no foundation, your power is gone, and this community knows it." The president's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Sweat glistened on his forehead, his smirk completely vanished. The board members shifted uncomfortably, one even standing as if ready to walk out. The neighbors clapped louder now, voices rising, the balance shifting right in front of everyone's eyes. The man gathered his papers calmly, tucking them back into the folder, his voice steady as he turned to the crowd. "You don't have to fear them anymore. Their rules mean nothing, their threats mean nothing. Their office stands on my land, and they can't take what isn't theirs." The hall erupted in cheers, neighbors standing, their voices filling the room with relief and triumph. The president sank back into his chair, his power crumbling in plain sight, and the man walked out of the hall slowly, the folder under his arm, his head high, the public reveal complete, the trap snapped shut, and the HOA's downfall had begun. The neighborhood felt different the very next morning, the air lighter, the whispers louder. Neighbors who once walked with their heads down now looked each other in the eyes, some even smiling, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The story of the meeting had spread faster than fire on dry grass. Every porch, every driveway, every corner was filled with talk of how the man had stood up to the board, how he had laid out the proof, how the president's face had turned pale when the truth hit him like a stone. Children repeated what they had overheard from their parents, laughing as they mocked the HOA's once mighty rules: no swimming, no fishing, no fun. They chanted, then burst into giggles. For the first time in years the board's shadow felt thin, broken, powerless. But inside the HOA office, panic ruled. The president slammed his fists on the table. The papers from the meeting scattered around him, his voice hoarse from shouting, "It's not true, it can't be true, he's bluffing." But the other members sat in silence, their eyes low, their faces pale. One finally whispered, "The documents were real, we all saw them," another added. "If the land doesn't belong to us, then everything we've built collapses." The president's hands trembled as he wiped sweat from his forehead, his arrogance crumbling into desperation. That afternoon the fake cops didn't show. The dark sedan never appeared. The intimidation that once pressed so heavily on the man's street vanished like smoke. Neighbors walked freely past his home now, some stopping to thank him quietly, their voices low but filled with respect. "You did what we couldn't," one said. "You stood up when we were too afraid," another whispered, tears in her eyes. The man nodded humbly, his face calm, his heart heavy with both relief and fire. He hadn't done it for thanks. He had done it because truth was stronger than lies. But their gratitude told him he was no longer fighting alone. Meanwhile, the HOA's authority unraveled. Fines went unpaid, notices left unopened. Families stopped answering their calls, rules ignored openly. The sound of laughter and freedom spreading louder each day. The president tried to send one last desperate letter, bold red ink warning of severe penalties. But when it arrived in mailboxes, neighbors only laughed, some tossing it straight into the trash, others bringing them together to burn in a barrel behind the man's home. Their laughter carrying into the night like music. The man stood back, watching the flames consume the empty threats, his arms crossed, his eyes calm, and he knew the collapse was complete. The guards who once patrolled the lake no longer came. The cameras set up by the board blinked uselessly. Their funding gone, their authority shattered, even their office, their proud symbol of control, stood in shame, neighbors pointing at it, laughing, whispering, "That's not even their land." The president avoided the streets now, slipping quietly from his home to his car, his head down. His once booming voice now a mutter. The board members too disappeared from public view, unable to face the people they once ruled. The man stood by the lake one evening, the water calm and golden in the light of the setting sun. Children splashing at the shore, Families gathered with picnic baskets, neighbors greeting him warmly, his heart swelled. This was how it should have always been: free, open, peaceful, no fear, no fake cops, no arrogant board lording over them. The collapse wasn't loud. No dramatic explosion, it was slow, steady, unstoppable, like the ground eroding under a heavy wall until it crumbled into dust. And as he watched the joy return to the community, he whispered quietly, "Their power is gone, and it's never coming back." His words carried on the evening breeze, the final truth settling over the neighborhood. The HOA had fallen, and the people were free weeks past, and the neighborhood settled into a new rhythm, one free from constant threats and letters. Laughter returned to the streets, children played by the lake without fear of being fined. Families sat on porches talking openly, no longer looking over their shoulders. The man walked quietly among them, no need for speeches, no desire for glory. But everywhere he went, neighbors stopped him with nods of gratitude, sometimes a handshake, sometimes just a look that said everything. He had given them back their freedom. Yet for him the story wasn't about revenge alone. It was about truth. Standing taller than lies, one crisp morning he returned to the county office, the same folder tucked under his arm. He met with the clerk who had given him the old records, her eyes curious. "Did you get what you needed?" she asked softly. The man placed the updated deed on her desk, signed and sealed. "Yes, I claimed the land legally," he said, his voice calm but certain. "The office they used as their fortress now belongs to me." The clerk's eyes widened. She smiled faintly. "So it's finished?" The man nodded. "It's finished, and they can never threaten this community again." When he left the office that day, the sunlight felt brighter, the weight finally lifting from his shoulders. He drove past the HOA building on his way home. Its windows dark, the parking lot empty, the proud sign by the entrance weathered and cracked. No one entered, no one left. It was a monument now, not of power, but of arrogance destroyed. He slowed the car, rolled down his window, and stared at it. One last time, his voice low but firm. "You built your empire on stolen land, and in the end it buried you." With that he drove on, never looking back. That evening the community gathered by the lake, not organized by any board, not controlled by any rule, just neighbors celebrating freedom. Food spread across long tables, music playing, laughter carrying across the water. Someone raised a glass and called out, "To the man who stood against them." The crowd cheered, but he only lifted his glass slightly, his voice quiet, to truth, the words simple yet powerful. The cheer rose again, louder, the sound of unity washing over the lake like a wave. Later, as the stars filled the night sky and the fire crackled by the shore, he stood alone for a moment, watching the water ripple, his reflection calm, his heart steady. The fight had been long, filled with threats, fear, and darkness, but in the end light had won, he whispered to himself. They thought fear was stronger, but truth always outlasts fear. His words faded into the night, carried by the wind, the final word spoken not as victory, but as a lesson, one that would live in the community long after the HOA's name was forgotten. For in the end, the land, the lake, and the people were free, and no false authority could ever cage them again.